About last year, I started this series reading Surah 1, and then I realized Surah 2 would take me 11 episodes to get through. I stopped caring. It's repetitive, it's boring. I can sum it up as God will punish you if you turn away from him. Muhammad is an awesome slave, and humans are worthless comparison to God. It is so repetitive, and it is a common tactic used in brainwashing. I've been told by many Muslims that it is not the proper direction to start from the beginning and go to the end. However, there are some Muslims who believe that the direction in and of itself is holy, even though it was created by a caliph that organized it in that particular direction. So I'm going to go with what people consider the historical direction, which is all over the place. It starts sort of near the end. And see if I can get through this. This is, I doubt it. I really doubt it. This is a tough, painful read to get through. I don't really enjoy it, but I figure I'll give it another shot. People seem to like it, and they seem to think that, who knows, maybe I will convert to Islam and find the truth if I read it, so it kind of makes them happy. So here goes nothing. I've been told to, on top of using at Quran.com, I was going with Ghali, Khan, and Shakir. I was also told to use the Reformist translation because it's better, it's less bias, and it has more depth to it. So here goes. I might be able to stick this out, who knows, over a period of time. I'm not making any promises. So here goes nothing. I'm starting with Surah 96. It is called The Clot. I think it's also translated The Leech, but when it's done really badly. And I believe the Reformist translation translates it as the embryo. So we're going to start out here. Okay, so it starts off with Noon, which basically says only Allah knows what that means. That's lost to eternity, basically. Whereas in the Reformist translation, it starts out with a verse 0 that says, in the name of God the gracious and the compassionate, which I guess, according to them, is what Noon means. So, who knows? Verse 1, Ghali says, read in the name of your Lord who created. Khan says, read in the name of the Lord who has created all things that exist. He puts that in parentheses. And the other two say exactly the same thing. Ghali says, created man from clots, or a thick piece of coagulated blood. All three of them use that term, except for the Reformist translation, which it says, he created a human being from an embryo. And this is where things kind of get weird, and you start noticing the Reformist is supposed to be unbiased, but it's rather biased, unfortunately. So all three translations say clots, which is exactly what they thought an embryo was back in the day. A lot of Muslims try and use the claim that Muhammad was told by Allah about embryology. There's another section that discusses all the stages. It talks about a clot. It talks about, I think, a ball of clay. It talks about a worm. And it's the stages of embryology. The problem is, this is hardly divine at all. Midwives throughout time have been looking over and examining miscarriage emissions and discharge. It's quite probable it was used in both magic and divination. Who knows? Women's history was usually lost, especially women's magic. It was kind of kept as a secret between women at the time. No one knows, but the Greeks had listed this same series 1,000 years ago or more as to the stages of embryonic development. There was nothing special, nothing miraculous, nothing magical about it, and even if the Greeks hadn't said anything, it was common knowledge. This is nothing special, nothing miraculous. It is a pure argument from ignorance. I can't think of how anybody without modern medicine would know that. Therefore, God done it. Same thing is true with the way that pyramids or the Nazca lines. I can't think of how those were created without modern technology. Therefore, aliens. You get pretty good geometry with a stick and some string. Same thing is true with embryology in this basic level. The Reformist translation is retconning it to say embryo. That is not what the Quran says. The Quran says a clot because that's all they could figure out at the time. there was no good other translation for it. Gali says, read, and your Lord is the most honorable. Khan says, most generous. Gali says, who taught by the pen. Khan says, who has taught the writing by the pen. The first person to write was the prophet Idris, or Enoch. And Shakir says, who taught to write with the pen. The reformist says, the one who taught by the pen. So the reformists and Gali are saying that Allah has taught people through the writings of the pen. Whereas Khan and Shakir are saying that God taught humans how to write through Enoch. So it's an interesting translation and a way to think about it. One's a just so story, one's saying God spread his word through the pen. Gali says, he taught man what he did not know. And they all seem to agree with that one. 6, Gali says, not at all. The other ones say, nay. However, I think this is a bad translation into English. The reformist says, alas, which makes a lot more sense in this case. Otherwise, if it's not at all or nay, it means that the writer is arguing with something or someone's arguing back and forth. Alas is going, such is life. So I think that's a much better translation, and we're going to go with that and assume that. Gali says, surely man does indeed grow inordinate. Khan says, verily man does transgress all bounds. And the reformist says, alas, the human being is bound to transgress. It's a natural thing, unfortunately, of humans. Gali says that he sees himself become self-sufficient. And Shakir says he sees himself free from want. When he achieves, he no longer has need. According to the reformists, therefore we get lazy and think that we're awesome and not as cool, and we think we're as cool as God and therefore don't need him. 9 and 10 should be one sentence, it looks like. Gali says, have you seen him who forbids a bondman when he prays? Khan says, have you seen him, O Muhammad, PB&J, seen him, Abu Jahl, who prevents? Abu Jahl was the sole perpetrator of persecution on the early Muslims. A slave, Muhammad, PB&J, when he prays. Shakir, have you seen him who forbids a servant when he prays? Reformist says, have you seen the one who deters a servant from being supported? And once again, Muhammad's a slave. We're all worthless sinners compared to how awesome and great God is. Let's all sing his praises because he's wonderful and we're pieces of shit. Okay, so we're going to put 11 and 12 together because it looks like that's the way they're put together. Gali says, have you seen in case he is upon guidance or he commands people to piety? Khan says, tell me if he, Muhammad, PB&J, is on the guidance of Allah or enjoins piety. Shakir says, have you considered if he were on the right way or enjoined guarding against evil, which I guess is the same thing as piety? Oh, God, I love the bad translations. And then the reformist says, have you seen if he were being guided or he ordered righteousness, which is the same thing as enjoins piety or guarding against evil. Okay. And these seem like full sentences, actually. So 13. Gali says, have you seen in case he cries, lies, and turns away? Khan says he's discussing Abu Jahl, who denies the truth, i.e. this Quran, and turns away. The rest of them seem to agree on this. Funny thing about Khan is denies the truth, i.e. this Quran. He's writing it at the time that he says this, so I really don't think he's discussing the Quran. I think he's discussing the words of Muhammad at the time. The Quran was not collaborated until near the end of Muhammad's life, which was a collection of different scriptures, if that. I've been told by certain Muslims, if it's got things in parentheses and extra annotated quotes, it's biased. It's a really bad translation, but then there are Muslims who believe that's a very good translation because it's giving you more information. So, who knows? Anyway, 14. Gali says, does he not know that Allah sees? Khan says, adds on to that what he does. They all seem to be in agreement about this one. 15. Gali, not at all, nay, which means alas. Indeed, in case he does not refrain, we will indeed trail him by the forelock, or we will catch him by the forelock, or smite his forehead. So, basically, trail him by the forelock means drag him around by his forehead. We will indeed trail him by the forelock means we will drag him by the hair on his forehead. And here's where the reformist once again shows its retconning bias. Alas, if he does not cease, we will strike the frontal lobe. I'm pretty sure they did not have a direct translation of that much detail at the time of Muhammad for the frontal lobe. It sounds very sciencey, but it's absolute BS. The forelock or the forehead makes much more sense and has a lot more backing to it than saying, yes, it was the frontal lobe. Are you also going to say that somewhere in the Quran he's discussing the hippocampus or or any of the other areas of the brain, the pituitary gland? I'm pretty sure it's not that detailed. 16, a lying sinful forelock or a lying sinful forehead. And the reformist, of course, says a frontal lobe which lies in errors, which is absolutely true. That is the part of the brain that would make mistakes or lie or make decisions, but that is not what this book says. Ghali says, so let him call upon his assembly. Khan says, council of helpers. Let him summon his council. And the reformist says, so let him call on his supporter. We will call upon the guards of hell. Khan says, to deal with him. Shakir says, we too would summon the braves of the army. And reformist says, we will call on the guardians. And nay, not at all. Basically, alas, do not obey him and prostrate yourself near to Allah. Don't obey Abu Jahl. Prostrate, kneel to Allah. You're a piece of crap, as we all, compared to how great Allah is. Let's all praise his name and do whatever he tells us to do because we're too stupid to know what we're doing. Okay, I know I have the second one lined up in the row. Beyond that, who knows? I'll give it my best shot. I think the second one's a two-parter, because the furthest I go in these is, I believe, 24 verses. So, we'll see you next time.